Kia ora koutou everybody. No mai haere mai, ngā manuhiri o ngā hau e whā, but you are welcome to Kaikoura. Welcome to the home of the whales. My name is Thomas. I work for Whale Watch Kaikoura. I've been working for the organisation for probably about 30 years. My parents were actually one of the founding members who started the business back in the early 80s. So yeah, welcome to Kaikoura, welcome to New Zealand. How long have you guys been here for?
Like a week.
About a week. Yeah, I'm not too sure where you have been so far around the country, but I hope you enjoy yourselves. It's a bit of a natural resources sort of wonderland, this place. We're really truly blessed to live in a place like this where our natural resources are still fairly pristine. The challenge is actually keeping them that way. So yeah, today I'm really just here to share with you a bit about our journey with Whale Watch Kaikoura and where it is we started, some of the trials and tribulations that we've faced over this journey, and where we might be planning to go in the future. So yeah, I'll just get straight into it. Our organisation is 100% Māori owned and operated. So right from the very beginning back in 1986, I suppose if there was roots to a plant, the seed for our organisation started right back with our tribal roots. And so it actually happened multiple generations before me. These folks in the images on the right hand side are responsible for probably planting and growing that seed. It actually all started way back in my grandparents' day, and at that stage we had tribal entities that sort of overseen the development for Māori across the country. And my grandfather was a member of what they called the NgaiTahu Maori Trust Board at the time. And its roots go a long way back. It's probably fair to say that our occupation of this area here can go back about 1,000 years. The tribal entity didn't go back that far, but it goes back a fair way. And really it's a collective of 18 different tribes spread out throughout the South Island. We identify as Ngai Tahu, and that is our tribal entity. Locally, across the South Island, there are 18 different hapu, which are subgroups of that tribe, and the local tribe here is known as Kati Kuri. Our organisation is 100% owned by those two entities. The original, I suppose, I go back to this point in time is because it was my grandfather who seeded the idea for our people to establish a place to stand. Traditionally, we've always sort of lived and revolved around marae, and marae are places where, as a people, we collectively come together, celebrate, farewell our dead, celebrate our newborns, and come together, I suppose, as a people. And back in the early 70s, we didn't actually have a marae here, and it was my grandfather who wanted to realise that vision and find a place for us to collectively stand. So he actually planted that seed. Before he passed away, he managed to acquire a piece of property just up on top of the hill here called Takahanga, and that's where our marae stands today. He passed away before the marae was actually developed, but then it fell onto the shoulders of my uncle, this fella in the middle here, Bill Solomon, Wuramu, and his job was really to take on that challenge, turn the piece of property they acquired and establish a marae for our people. At the same time, this is back in the probably very early 80s, this community was a very different place to what it is today. The primary employers in this community at that stage was the railways, which was state-owned, and then fishing and farming. And both of those sectors were heavily subsidised at the time, but they were about to go backwards. So we really had a challenge at that point in time to try and develop some sort of economic base for our people to to grow from. And so that's actually when the next idea come to fruition, and it was a drive to try and develop that economic platform for our people to utilise, to build upon. Both of these entities, this is where what our marae looks like today, sort of started roughly about the same time. So at the same time as developing our marae on that piece of property, we also branched off to try and develop a bit of business. People are always asking the question about where did the journey start? Where did the idea first sort of come to us? And to be fair, if there was anything that we were quite good at that period of time, it was really our understanding of this local coastline. We had lived here all our lives. My grandparents, besides being on different boards, he was actually a fisherman. My uncles were also mostly fishermen, so they knew a lot about the sea. We knew that there were whales there, and we never thought people would come from around the world to watch them. And actually we were inspired, probably closer to your guys' home, from the operation in Boston. That's probably one of the first whale watching operations around the world. They were at least 20 years our senior when we were thinking about undertaking the journey. Some of the challenges for us at this point in time was really related to whether or not Māori especially were going to be any good at business. We had a lot of critics out there, I'd call them, who didn't believe that we were really capable of getting into our own businesses, running our own businesses and being successful. And that commentary really came about because at the same time we were developing our marae, we were also fighting a treaty claim against the Crown to establish a lot of grievances and remedying those, but primarily aimed at executing a settlement between Ngai Tahu, our tribal entity, and the Crown for some sort of financial kickstart. And so we didn't actually fall out of that. We took off in conjunction with it all, but those were just some of the challenges that were around at the time. That's when they actually heard of and learnt about the operations in Boston. A speaker actually from the US had come over to New Zealand, and he was doing community talks around the country. So my parents and aunties and uncles sort of all got in a van and travelled to the next event, which was being held in Christchurch, and listened to this guy, and he was talking about whale watching in Boston. And that's really where the idea first sort of sprung to our mind, that we could actually establish something here in Kaikoura and get an operation going where people might come from different places to watch our whales. We didn't start by no means with a hiss and a roar. We had very, very humble beginnings. In fact, we knocked on the doors of all of the normal funding fraternities, all the banks, and they all actually turned us down. So we actually ended up going to an independent financer and putting homes up as collateral. This isn't just me, this is my parents. They were involved in, we collectively come up with four homes that belong to our parents and uncles, to come up with a loan essentially for $90,000. That's what we started this business with. I remember my parents sort of coming home after deciding and signing on the dotted line that they'd put their homes up as collateral. Really excited about the idea, but the very next day they were so terrified they all got together again to ask themselves the question, have we done the right thing, is this crazy? But all they could acquire really between all four properties was $90,000, and this is what we looked like right at the very beginning. We just about spent every penny on that boat that was brand new. Nobody had ever owned a brand new boat here in Kaikoura. And we spent about $60,000 on that boat. It could only carry 8 passengers at a time. And we got that Land Rover. That was our first bus. It could carry 8 passengers at a time. So they were a perfect match. That's about what we knew about business at the time. To give you a good example of this, this has been our headquarters ever since actually. We moved into the old railway station because the railways were moving out, and a lot of our customers that turned up back in these days would walk up that little rampway and take the first door on the right, but just in behind those windows actually used to be the men's public urinals. So it really gives you a bit of an idea about how little we actually knew about business. It'd be fair to say we were pretty high in enthusiasm. We knew a fair bit about the sea. We knew how to look after visitors because it's part of our cultural identity, but we had no other knowledge. We threw a coat of blue paint up and a sign. One of the Whanau actually drew that logo. It depicts Paikea, the whale rider. We thought that was really cool at the time. But that was the extent of our marketing knowledge. We had a lot to learn and so many different challenges to face along the way. But if we weren't going to do anything, nobody was going to do anything for us. So you were kind of essentially stuck between a rock and a hard place. That first year of operation, we carried 3,000 passengers. We thought that was pretty awesome. And that's pretty much where we started our journey. Skipping a bit off to the left there. I don't know if you've been out to see the whales or if you know much about Kaikoura. Okay. The big secret for this region is actually hidden beneath the water, and about a half a nautical mile off a part of the coast south of here, the water actually drops from about 150, 200 metres deep to approximately 1,000 metres. It's a big underwater canyon network that starts here and works its way all the way up past the end of the North Island. This is essentially, I suppose, our version of the Grand Canyon, but it's actually all underwater. That's exactly what it looks like. Has very steep cliff faces. It's home to our whales. The whales that we watch on a regular basis are sperm whales. They live here pretty much all year round, and they use this canyon network as a big boarding school. They're all young, teenage male sperm whales. They live in this area between 15 and 20 years. All they do is eat and sleep every day. When they reach the age of about 35, maybe 40, they decide to leave this area and start chasing after the females. Females move around constantly because they travel in really big groups, and our males move off chasing after them to see if they can catch a lady or two. It doesn't always happen, and they do a fair bit of trying, but the first half of their lives essentially, or the first third of their life is spent here in Kaikoura just growing up. We've been fortunate enough to see in our time here that exchange happen probably about 2 or 3 times. When we first operated, a lot of those whales that we used to watch then we don't see anymore. They're all out trying to breed. The ones that we've been watching now, some of the older ones we've been watching for 10 to 15 years. So they're at the very end. And then we can identify about 86 different individuals in this area that we've running a catalogue. There's a few of that group that we've managed to give names, more for our purpose of quickly identifying them. Over the summer periods especially, we spend more time on the water watching these whales than we do on the land with our families, so you get to know them very, very well. But that's the primary reason why they're here, really deep water, close to land. We're fortunate enough to not only just have sperm whales that live here, but we get nearly half the world's populations of different marine mammals pass through the area. So that canyon network, although it's home to the sperm whale, it's also Interstate Highway 1 for all whales that move up and down the eastern coast of New Zealand. So we get humpback whale, fin whale, blue whale, orca, minke whale, mainly the dusky dolphin, also a whole range of different seabirds, including the wandering and royal albatross. So in terms of the marine life in the area, it's a real hot spot just here in Kaikoura, but it's all due to that underwater canyon network that comes so close to land. Back to, I suppose, the Whale Watch journey. This is one of our early innovations, we call it. We went from that little 6-metre boat to this vessel here. The innovation in this picture is actually a cabin on the front. It was really good. It was actually my boat. I didn't come up with the innovation. That was another guy's idea. But it meant that we could get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and we'd be relatively warm and dry. The problem was we really forgot about the guys in the back of the boat, and they ultimately are the most important part of the organisation, your customers. And so we had to learn the hard way through the School of Hard Knocks mainly about changing our focus, starting to look at our systems and processes from the customer's perspective and building our tourism operation up from there. So we went on a bit of an evolution over time. That's the old station with the blue paint. We're still in the old station, but we renovated it a fair bit. If you ever come down to our place walking across there, you'll have in the back of your mind that used to be the men's urinals, but we put the doors right at the front of the building where they're supposed to belong. We left no stone really unturned, and when we first started operating, we scaled our boats up to the ones you can see there, and we used to trailer our vessels, load and then back them into the water with passengers on. We thought that was really pretty clever, and so did the Indonesian military. They come over to watch us launch and retrieve boats. I don't know why. They might have been thinking of invasion techniques, I'm not too sure, but anyway, they thought it was fascinating. You could put vessels that size onto trailers and launch and retrieve them. The bad thing about that, it was really, I suppose, a health and safety problem ready to happen. But over the next 5 or 6 years, we thought we better sharpen that up, and so we developed a marina, primarily designed for our operation to launch and retrieve and load passengers safely. You remember the small vessels. These are the ones we operate today, so we've scaled up a fair way. These boats here are capable of carrying 116 passengers at a time. In our peak season, between approximately November and March, we do 4 tours a day, and we can carry in excess of 800 passengers each day. Pre-COVID, we were carrying roughly around 100,000 visitors a year. So it's certainly scaled up from the 3,000 that we started with in the early days. The vessels that we use today are all purpose designed for whale watching. We really wanted to be able to give our customers a first-hand view, so we put in all-round viewing. Nobody has to stand behind somebody's shoulder to get first-class view of the marine life. And then all the whistles and bells, from air conditioning in cabins to really large seats, widescreen TVs, the rest of it, really to lift the whale watching experience. At the heart of it all, however, whales and what you see out the windows is still the star of the show. We've just polished up the way we managed to take you there. I suppose just roughly going over our company vision, mission, it's all pretty straightforward, but we've sort of entwined a lot of our cultural concepts that are fundamental to who it is we are and how we apply them. We've adopted these ones over here in terms of our values. Manaakitanga is really translated into looking after or hosting your guests. Tino rangatiratanga is pretty much being able to make decisions on, the benefit or your basis. So iwi whanau, so all of the time we're looking back at what and how we're able to contribute back to our community, because we are born from the community. Kaitiakitanga, we really take our environmental impact, or guardianship essentially, that's what it's translated into, seriously. And then whakapapa is really about our cultural identity and maintaining those. Those actually become the core values that we test all of our decision making from going forward. I suppose if I was to touch on a few critical areas that are really important to us, quite clearly the environmental side of things is at the heart of a lot of our thinking and decision making. Leaving as small as possible footprints is really important to us. At the end of the day, we probably stand to lose the most if we adversely impact the whale population. If there's no whales, there's no whale watching. And I suppose in a certain way, COVID really demonstrated, I suppose, to our entire community how important tourism, I suppose, overall is to this community. With all of our borders closed, we pretty much lost probably close to 80% of our business. And although we managed to stay, keep the lights on and keep people employed over that time, we were probably one of only a few survival cases. A lot of them weren't able to do that. And so a number of businesses in this community sort of suffered and had to either hibernate or close up shop. But it really does demonstrate without the natural environment that we've got out the door, we really depend on it. So looking after it's priority number one. In relation to that, we're constantly measuring our footprint. So we've come up with different ways to monitor and measure our carbon outputs, see where they are. This is just a snapshot of 2019 emissions, which were pre-COVID numbers. That's actually standard practice now for most businesses in New Zealand. So it's really good that as a country we can really focus on trying to make as small as possible environmental footsteps. What we don't measure there, that will be a measurement in the future, is really the sound footprint, especially for whales. Whales live in a world of sound. The amount of noise you actually leave in the water is very important. So adopting technologies like we have on our vessels with no prop-driven boats, they're all run and driven by internal jet units, which are significantly more quiet in the water, becomes really critical, I suppose, to the well-being over time. Carbon footprint's one thing, but being in a position to actually know more, because there's actually, even though we've been doing this for 30 years, there's a huge amount we don't know. For example, nobody actually goes out at night time to work out what whales are doing in the night. People have got pretty decent theories, but nobody's 100% sure. Nobody actually tracks or has monitored how whales feed and what type of food they're actually eating beneath the water. A lot of it's based on historical whaling data, which is points out that they primarily eat squid. But nobody has really gone the next steps, I suppose, into filling some of those questions in relation to the whale's food web, how that may or may not be impacted going forward over the next 10, 15, 20 years with the way we are looking at different environmental condition changing in our environment. So there's big holes, I suppose, in our information and our knowledge that we need to build to better position ourselves to manage those areas in the future. Innovation, yep, that's a big part of, I suppose, our focus going forward. We're always thinking of new ways and better ways to, fill that gap between our service, taking people out to see whales. We've got ideas in terms of what we might want to do. We do a lot of reverse engineering, look at all the touch points within our organisation where our customers sort of flow, and then taking each part of that, those touch points apart and looking at how we might be able to innovate those processes and then string them together in the overall experience. Some of the things that we're planning on doing in the very near future involve a lot of onboard presentation tech. We've actually gone as far already to digitise all of our vessels, and so ultimately we're going to utilise them in a presentation system. Don't know if that's... We're just about to bring on board our vessels real-time GPS vessel tracking and mapping, adding these tools to the onboard screen presentations, using things like the Auckland Sky Tower, that could be the Empire State Building, to give people a visual example of where they are in the world in terms of our canyon network and giving them an impression about what sort of depth of water is underneath the keel. This is just a bit of an idea of how that works. We've actually just had this developed recently. Actually, it'll be on board our boats before June, ready for our summer 24 season. It gives you a bit of an idea of the depth of water dropping away. You can see the scale sliding up the Empire State Building. This is just an innovative way to give people a bit of an idea of the canyon network. But we thought that was cool, but wouldn't it be better if we actually took our visitors and visually showed them what that might look like. So we talked to NIWA, which is New Zealand's leading research body in the country. And they gave us the 3D mapping of the canyon network that they've taken over the years. We utilised it, rebuilt it, and then wanted to show our visitors exactly that same thing. So while you're on board, people really take it for granted that you just see water. But when you show them that, in fact, you're over a massive submarine canyon, they never look out the window the same way, actually. It's quite funny. But this gives you a real visual representation of what the canyon's like. You get a real sense, a feel, I suppose, of the world of the whales firsthand by seeing your location, which is the anchor, and then where you're placed in the canyon network. It gives you a bit of an idea of how and where our whales live. I suppose part of that journey, and this will be for the future, that stuff we're about to do now, but ultimately we've always thought with knowledge and understanding you can actually start sharing that story in a whole lot more detail. And ultimately we would love to be able to build an accurate representation of a POV from a whale's perspective and follow that whale down. There's a lot of stuff we already know. We know they use echolocation, so they generate the sound in the front of their head. It's like switching a light on and off in a dark room. And it's a fairly rhythmic sound, but it sends pulse waves through the water, and they use it for their eyesight. This is what, potentially the world of the whales might look like through their eyes. And one of the key things we would really love to do is reenact the battle sequence between the sperm whale and their primary prey, which are the giant squid. Giant squid, the largest one recorded in New Zealand, was about 72 feet long. They're fairly big and they weighed about a tonne. So we've never seen a living one, but they actually get really big. On average, they're probably about 12 odd metres in length from tip to the end of their tentacles. We know the sperm whales feed on them on a daily basis, and we've often seen big chunks of squid left behind because they're not always the tidiest eater. But it would be fascinating to build up the data and the knowledge using different technologies. One of our next steps, which we're developing right now, working with some of New Zealand's leading scientists, is a underwater hydrophone array, wiring in fact the Kaikoura Canyon network for sound. Hydrophones are a real passive acoustic method of tracking and following sperm whales, and we're fortunate that sperm whales use echolocation to see, so they're regularly making a clicking noise. That's all it sounds like. You can actually build arrays. They're not a new thing. People are using them everywhere around the world, but we'd love to develop one which we use real-time network tracking. Good old Elon would probably come to the party with Starlink, and we could put this together to actually give people, while they're on board, an idea of not just where the whales are located, but where they are in their dive, how deep they're diving, where they're feeding, over time listening to their communications. So in many ways, the more data you build up and the use of potentially AI or computer learning, we may one day be able to crack their language and their communication. And one day it'd be amazing if we could actually talk to whales, but that'd be another step. In the short term, taking the information we learn and then sharing it, I suppose, in every classroom across the country will be one of the early goals once we develop this technology. But it all adds to the first part which we talked about, which is the environmental position. The more you know, the more you understand, the better you can apply the information, and the better you can influence, shape, advocate for the well-being of the whales. Influencing regulation policy across New Zealand would be the first step. We'd focus on that primarily because it's our backyard. Looking after it's very important to us. But ultimately getting it out into, right now we just focus on the local schools. We don't do this, we take them out on boats, but being able to reach out to every classroom around the country and share the resource which is in their backyard but they may not be able to get here to watch it would be one awesome step. I suppose finally really we get back to our people, and when I say our people I don't just mean our team. We realise more than probably anybody that tourism and its importance in this community really started from our marae, and we ultimately end up back in our marae. And our organisation is owned by those two shareholders I mentioned right at the very beginning. It's actually also set up as a charitable trust. It's owned primarily for charitable purposes. So over the 30 years plus that we've been operating, we've distributed millions of dollars back into our community. And it was developed that way primarily because it was a foundation, a platform in which we could use to enrich the lives and the future lives of not just us, but our children after us and their children. So I suppose that's where it's important. It always gets back to our marae, gets back to our community, and these little fellas at the front here, which is part of the local preschool, future whale watchers, I suppose, going forward. So yep, that was the flash tour, 30 years. You guys got any questions, or you want me to elaborate on any part there that might be useful?
Two kind of questions. One, could you kind of elaborate on what the relationship is between like the Whale Watch and the other aquatic tour companies that are in the area?
Yeah, they're first and foremost independent. We only do whale watching by boat. That's the only operation that we control. The others are set up as individual companies, organisations, and that's sort of, I suppose, from a real legal perspective, that's the way they're structured. In terms of how we operate, yeah, that's very, very different. We work really quite closely with everybody. We know better than most people that at the end of the day, getting people to come to Kaikoura is a joint effort. Joint collaboration, destination-based marketing and promotion is really important for us. Even as an organisation today, although we're probably the biggest tourism operator in Kaikoura, doing that by ourselves is near impossible. I wouldn't say impossible, but you get a lot more traction working with everybody. And I suppose a good example of that is in terms of COVID, it really sort of set us back a fair bit in a number of ways. First and foremost, well, it stopped the visitors coming. That sort of took us off the itineraries for a lot of places. We're still recovering today. This is the first year really back for New Zealand after COVID, and at best we've established in the last 12 months probably 70% of the air route capacity that used to exist pre-COVID. Those air corridors or routes took decades to actually set up. Fingers crossed it's not going to take decades for them to re-establish, but essentially they're all driven by demand. We're so far away from, especially the Northern Hemisphere, where most of our visitors come from, that getting them back into small destinations like this is actually really driven by demand. Almost every airline will factor in flights and routes and connections, say from Europe, which is a really big market of ours. Most people will travel to England, Spain, which are real cost-effective short routes for a holiday, the demand to get all the way down to New Zealand is actually really quite small. In fact, it's fair to say we have always been a niche market. We only really attract less than 1% of global travel to New Zealand, even pre-COVID. And it remains roughly about that for the last 2 decades. So on that basis, it's going to take us a wee while before those routes get to where they were pre-COVID. And our visitor numbers currently probably into Aotearoa, into New Zealand, would be well down. Pre-COVID, they were about 5 to 6 million visitors a year. We would be lucky to be slightly over halfway home in relation to that now. Auckland, which is our biggest international gateway, they were lucky during the peak season to get up to 70% of the pre-COVID carry. So we got a long way to go.
During the pandemic, was there any difference seen in like the behavior of like certain marine life? Because I know in parts of the world, like they started coming up more.
Yeah, we were lucky enough to be operating that entire time. So we didn't really notice a dramatic change in the marine life. I don't think they cared less there was a border closed, or I think it was the people that were impacted most. And from our local community, it was probably fair to say there was a good portion of our local community that liked the isolation and enjoyed the fact that they were the only people using the beach, which was, not everybody was in that camp, but it didn't really impact on the marine mammals at all. Prior to COVID, we actually had an earthquake, and the earthquake was probably more of an environmental impact than COVID ever was. But our environment's actually really has the ability to regenerate really quick. After the earthquake in Kaikoura, there was on the seabed, the bottom of the canyon, a community of different types of animals. I don't know exactly what to call them, starfish, worms, some sort of sea anemones, different pods, that our local researchers were studying them because they were very diverse. Essentially, they were all the animals that do all the cleaning. Anything that dies and falls to the bottom, that's the engine room that tidies up. And then they produce all the nutrients that then pool on the seabed, and where those canyons edges are, the currents that move through these canyons bring all those nutrients to the surface, and that's what actually fuels the food web. And so they're a very important piece of the puzzle, but one that nobody actually ever sees. After the earthquake itself triggered a underwater avalanche that also caused a small tsunami. In fact, a lot of us would have been underwater if it weren't for the fact that the entire coastline got lifted out of the water, at a minimum 2 metres, and at the highest level there's lifts along the coastline of about 5 or 6 metres higher. I suppose the good news is, in terms of rising sea levels, we've brought ourselves probably an extra 15 years, because we're at a minimum 2 metres higher than we used to be. But that also reduced the impact of the tsunami. But unfortunately, all of those communities that existed on the seabed got completely wiped out. The avalanche started here, and actually within 2 days it had worked its way off the coast of Napier, which is over 1,000 kilometres away. That avalanche travelled through the canyon network, and they had research vessels off Napier recording seismic movement that detected the flow of the avalanche going past them up there. It would have worked its way all the way into the Pacific Basin, just shy of, I suppose, Tonga and countries like that. So underwater, the avalanche was devastating. And straight after the earthquake and after the avalanche, all of those communities were wiped out. Within 1 year, they're all re-established, stronger if not better than they were pre-earthquake. And other things that have changed, I suppose, after the earthquake, is a lot of the canyon faces had build-ups of sediment sitting on the edges. The avalanche cleaned a lot of that off, and so now the canyon edges are all rock, and they call it hard, I suppose. And that's really important for a lot of fish species. So the deep water fish like groper, blue nose, hoki, they have all actually accelerated. They're there in more abundance than they ever used to be. So that could be a positive also in the long term for our whales. Yeah, long answer. Yeah.
You kind of got into it earlier, but I was just wondering like what countries you get the most visitors.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, at the moment, and it's about traditional. UK is one of our biggest markets. Germany, the US, Australia. Yeah, they'd probably be our top 4. China used to be quite strong, but they haven't recovered at this stage. They're still all pretty much in lockdown. But yeah, those would be our key markets for here. UK and Germany actually are the strongest for us. Yeah, US is about 3rd. It's actually really awesome. This is our first year being back open since COVID, and yeah, it was awesome actually to get international visitors back. It didn't take long for our entire community to start pointing out, oh, we had, you know, Americans here, we could hear their accent in store, and then people from the UK and Germany. It's like we were, you know, back on a map somehow, and the community really enjoyed it, having the international visitors back on the scene. Yeah. Yeah.
How far out do you have to like go to like be able to see a whale?
I'll go back to that canyon image. This is my PlayStation spam from back in the day. So this is the peninsula here. Yeah. So just off this edge is usually where we can encounter whales all the time. It goes into this point here, and that's about half a mile off part of the coast just to the south here, and whales live throughout that network. Yeah, they're everywhere within that area, so it can take us anywhere between 15 minutes to sort of cover the distance from South Bay, just here, where we launched, to this edge of the canyon network, and then we're pretty much in the whale zone as soon as we hit the deep water. Yeah, so it doesn't take very long at all.
I was going to say, I figured it would be like longer than that. I thought you would have to like at least prefer like a while.
Yeah. Normally, sperm whales are actually really quite hard to watch anywhere else in the world. Because of this canyon network, you know, it really brings them inshore. Most places you have to be about 30 or 40 nautical miles out before you can encounter sperm whales. Yeah.